What's up, college football addicts? Today we are jam-packed. Lots of drama going down. Major updates for LSU fans, major updates for Florida fans, and even some updates for the Ole Miss faithful as well. It's rivalry week. You're all going all out. I understand the Egg Bowl is just about to kick off. Maybe you're watching this while the Egg Bowl is on too. And as much drama as there is in that Egg Bowl game, we all understand that the drama outside of it may dwarf what happens on the field. So let's get right into it. Rivalry week. So I even went all out and put the jersey on for you guys today. I haven't worn this personally since Florida State was in the national championship game. So here we go. Let's first start by talking about First Take. Stephen A. Smith defended Lane Kiffin in a clash with Paul Feinbaum on First Take. Now, on the ESPN show, Feinbaum questioned Kiffin's family visiting Florida's and LSU's campuses right before key games, calling it a distraction with the playoff hopes that Ole Miss currently has. Now, I think I agree with Feinbaum here. And I think that Lane should have made his decision sooner. Now, I'll say this. I understand that First Take, Feinbaum, and ESPN, and Stephen A. Smith, I understand what they do. They try to sensationalize as much as they can. They try to go very deep into just the ultimate hot takes that they can. But I don't necessarily think that Feinbaum is wrong here. I think that when you really consider the players, when you consider the guys that Lane Kiffin has agreed to coach, develop, mentor, whatever aspect, whatever angle you want of this has been pretty piss poor for them. This drama around the situation, though it's been great for us, though it's fun for the fans, maybe not LSU fans or Ole Miss fans or Florida fans that have been on pins and needles for the last month, but while it's maybe fun for the sport, the decision has certainly created an environment that's unlike any other for the Ole Miss players. You also just look at the aspect of finishing a job. Lane Kiffin hired to do a job at Ole Miss, and right now that very much feels like it takes a backseat to all of the drama that's going on. If Lane Kiffin had promised any one of these three schools, hey, I am going to finish out my season, the entire season, and then I'm going to make my decision. Florida could have hired Lane Kiffin in January. LSU could have hired Lane Kiffin in January. We had Blake Ruffino of AYS Sports on, and we talked about that. Hey, would they continue to wait? And I think they would. Signing day is coming up in just a couple of days. You're not going to see some mass exodus. You're not going to see a bunch of guys jump in the transfer portal when they're on a playoff roster. Now, may they do that later in January when it officially opens? Sure. May they do that when their season's over if Ole Miss goes on to win the national title with or without Lane? Of course. But I do think there's an aspect of finishing a job that leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. Listen, I understand if you're an Ole Miss fan. Ole Miss is a program that has given Lane Kiffin absolutely everything. I sympathize with them. Let's be very fair. This is a symbiotic relationship. A lot of people focus on what Lane has done for Ole Miss. And yes, it has been remarkable. Lane Kiffin has them as a one-loss team, that one loss being on the road in Athens, Georgia, where outside of that Bama game, Georgia never loses, certainly not over the last three or so years. Lane Kiffin has given Ole Miss a ton, but Ole Miss has given Lane Kiffin a lot. Ole Miss has given Lane Kiffin an ability and a platform and a program to where he is the hottest name on the market, to where he has rebuilt his reputation, to where though this situation and the drama that's unfolded has happened, Ole Miss has given him the ability to now be a commodity. And so if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I get it, man. I get you guys being frustrated with this. I'd be in the same boat. Moving on a little bit, let's talk about recent news with LSU. News is that LSU is going to pay Brian Kelly his full salary. Now, what does this mean? What does paying this salary, how does it impact Lane Kiffin? Well, the first thing you know is that LSU has money. And I don't think you needed to hear that LSU was going to pay the full salary, the full buyout to know that LSU had money. You can look at the promises that they're making Lane. You can look at the way that they build a roster. You can look at the way that they recruit. You can look at the way that they are one of the top programs in the country, and you can understand that they've got money. But what does this also do for Lane Kiffin and LSU? I think it makes them a little more desperate to find a premier guy. It makes it a little bit more urgent that they get a guy that is going to make a difference, that they get a surefire winner. And does that maybe increase what they'll offer Lane? Does that maybe put their backs up against the wall a little bit more so that they can land him? It shows their commitment to winning. If Lane picks LSU, I'm sure he wishes that they didn't have to pay that buyout fully so that they could have many more millions to invest in him or his program. But the fact that they're paying him out fully probably gives Lane a little bit more leverage in this situation. Now, I'll say this. I don't think Lane cares about the money for himself personally, though he's probably going to be the highest paid coach in the sport tomorrow. But this almost guarantees that Lane's buyout and the assurances for Kiffin are going to be record-breaking for LSU. Staying on LSU for a minute, how about message board rumors and hot takes? The recent news there is that an LSU billionaire dropped an absolute nuke on LSU's plans. You guys know what Raising Cane's is. Now, if you follow my FSU channel, you'll know that I'm a Guthrie's guy. But you know what Raising Cane's is. Born out of Guthrie's. I will say that. They are the OG. But the message board rumor is that billionaire owner Todd Graves is saying that LSU has no chance. That LSU has been told that this thing is over. Raising Cane's known synonymously with that LSU region, that LSU brand. And I understand if you're a Canes fan, you probably get the extra toast, right? I do the double fries at Guthrie's, but same concept. Just give me all the carbs. Now, maybe it's a smokescreen. Maybe it's a pure internet rumor BS. Maybe he's wrong. Maybe we all end up being wrong in the way that we predict this thing. And he doesn't pick any of these three schools to coach at next year. But if there was ever a guy who would know, would you think it'd be a billionaire guy in Louisiana that might have a connection or two? I do want to hear from the LSU fans. Is it BS? Is there any truth to it? Did it concern you even just 1% slightly, as we're just a day away from an announcement now? Let's move on to Florida fans. That recent news that we talked about at LSU, does that make you more hopeful? Does that make you more confident? UF started interviewing some other coaches this week. This is huge. And it certainly impacts some of the ways you have to think about Lane. If they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, if they knew that it was a done deal, if the things that have been reported on message boards, on social media, here on YouTube, if all of those things were locked in, signed, sealed, delivered, would they be interviewing Clark Lee this week? Now, we'll talk about Lee in just a moment. We'll talk about Drink in just a moment. But would they be doing that? It's got to give you a little bit of pause if you're a Florida fan, right? Maybe Florida is just trying to put up a smokescreen themselves. I think there's the chance of that. We talked about this at 1 a.m. on a Saturday morning after I'd been in Carter Finley Stadium at the FSU game. I got back to a hotel and recorded a video. Then I told you guys, if somebody starts interviewing other coaches this week, take that as a sign. And the report came out this morning that Clark Lee was interviewed, that Florida did chat with him. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. Moving on to some major program changes that Florida announced. The recent news there is that Florida looks like they're going to start to hire a GM, but pause that process. Why do you think they paused that process? Why do you think they stopped doing what they were doing? When you start to connect the dots, when you start to connect the puzzle pieces, I think they want to know who their coach is. I think they know that they need Kiffin's input on this. I think that the most successful GM and coach combinations that you can see work in lockstep. That's certainly the case when you look at the Grove Collective CEO and you look at Ole Miss's Lane Kiffin. I think you want those guys uniform, in lockstep. If you're moving forward together, that is the best path. And so they paused what they were doing. They said, wait, let's see how this weekend turns out before we do anything. Can you maybe get a better GM if Lane's your coach? Are there some GMs that you're talking with that won't come if Lane's not the coach? I think those both seem pretty reasonable. I was told early on in this, weeks ago, that Lane wanted to be able to make and dictate the decisions that were made around this football program if he signed with UF. I think he wants the same thing at Ole Miss. I think he wants the same thing at LSU. And so them pausing it gives me some pause. Lastly, we'll go on to Ole Miss. You guys have a big game today. The game is massive. It certainly impacts Lane Kiffin. It certainly impacts the playoffs. If you win, you're in. There's no doubt about it. But the Egg Bowl gets weird. And I don't mean a guy lifting his leg to fake pee in the end zone weird. The game does get weird. As a Florida State guy, the Florida game gets weird the last weekend of the year. You guys know that the Iron Bowl gets weird. You guys know that Clemson and South Carolina gets weird. You know that Kentucky and Louisville gets weird. You know that Arizona and Arizona State gets weird. And of course, the game, Michigan and Ohio State gets weird. But maybe none of them as weird as the Egg Bowl. And though that game may not have the national relevance at times that the game that Ohio State and Michigan has, though it may not have the implications that the Iron Bowl has on a consistent basis, rivalry games get weird. It was just a year ago that a 7-win team in Georgia Tech took Georgia to 8 overtimes. So if you win, you're in. But if you lose, are we really sure? Are we really sure? There's coming a log jam, and there's a lot of 2-loss teams that have all beaten up on each other in the SEC. And you could have another 2-loss team upset the number 1 team in the country tomorrow. And you could have Notre Dame, Miami, Vandy, all sitting there with wins at the end of the year. And you might be saying, what do we do with Ole Miss? If you lose this game, you would be expected to drop a couple of spots. That wouldn't shock anybody. You're 5th right now. Maybe you drop down to 8th, 9th by losing to an unranked team. And then what happens if your coach leaves? Do you drop a couple more spots? They asked the other day when the rankings came out, what if Lane leaves? Do you drop Ole Miss at all? And they said, no, we wouldn't have seen. We wouldn't have that data point. We wouldn't know what they look like without their coach. But then they were pressed on it. And on the teleconference, they certainly gave some possibility to Ole Miss being dropped. If you lose to an unranked team the last week of the year, we understand games at the end of the year matter more than they do at the beginning. We understand that. Just look at Miami and Notre Dame, how that game just doesn't have the same meaning as it did maybe early in the year. You lose a couple spots there. You lose a couple spots because your coach is gone, and you go from hosting a playoff game to now being out of the playoff. Now, listen, as an FSU fan, I hate that. I don't think that's right. I don't think what you earn on the field should be dictated by the hypothetical of what we think would happen because you're missing somewhat of importance. But I'll also tell you this, the committee has no morals. The committee has no ethics. They will do what they think is best for TV ratings. They will do what they think is best for matchups. And when you're comparing a bunch of 10-2 teams in the SEC, when you've got a BYU that could upset a Texas Tech and steal a spot, when you've got this Notre Dame Miami issue going on, don't be surprised if the committee does something absolutely unconscionable. I feel for the Ole Miss players. I feel for the Ole Miss fans, but you got to go out and win this game because you can't leave it in the hands of the committee. On to coaches just really quickly. Missouri's Eli Drinkowitz and Vanderbilt's Clark Lee are both off the table now. They both signed extensions. This is a big deal too. These were backup candidates. I think they were more so backups for Florida. I don't know that I saw either one of these guys going to LSU. I don't think this was in the cards for the Tigers, but it certainly impacts Lane Kiffin. What does plan B look like now? Because tomorrow we're going to find out who whiffed here. Tomorrow we're going to find out how rough it is out there for the folks who don't get Lane Kiffin. Whether that be LSU in Florida because Lane stays, whether that be Ole Miss in Florida because he goes to LSU, or whether that be Ole Miss in LSU because he goes and follows Spurrier and his legacy to Gainesville. Plan B for LSU has to be Summerall. That has to be the direction they go. And maybe that hurts Auburn. Maybe that snatches him away from them. Plan B for UF, it feels like Jed Fish at this point. Maybe Lincoln Riley. But it feels like they're going to have to take a big swing after whiffing on a big swing. Both of these teams swung for the proverbial fences, and both of them now are putting all of their eggs in one basket, and they'll have to reset because even the guys that Florida has interviewed have now said, we're not going there. Chris Lowe of On3, very tied in, very connected, says that he thinks he's staying at Ole Miss. Of all the predictions that On3 put out the other day, of the Barstool guys and the 247 guys and the ESPN guys and the SEC Network guys and everyone tied to the sport, every voice, every personality tied to the sport, I don't think their predictions mean a whole lot. But when Chris Lowe said he was staying, when Chris Lowe predicted he'll be in Oxford next year, it certainly made a lot of people pause. Could this whole thing have been an elaborate troll by Lane Kiffin? Listen, I'll give Lane some credit here. I don't think so. I don't think that this was something to garner attention, though I think Lane loves it. I don't think this was something that Lane calculated to pull the wool over everybody's eyes and then ride into the playoffs at Ole Miss. I think Lane truly weighed all of his options and did what was best for him. If he stays at Ole Miss, I understand that it frustrated that fan base. I understand that it frustrated the players. I understand that it frustrated the administration, the school, the donors, the boosters. But I think it was Lane just doing his due diligence to do what he thought was best for him. So now it's prediction time. And I could not be more perplexed here. There are so many things about each program that make me think he's going or staying. And there are so many things about each program that make me think he wouldn't go there. There are so many tea leaves you can read. I think all three options seem like slam dunks for Lane. Let's be very honest. UF has all the ties, all the resources you could want, a roster that I think you could win pretty quickly with if coached properly. LSU is a top 3 program in the country when run correctly. There is no doubt about that. Ole Miss, the program that gave you everything, where you're building something, where you are likely going to the playoffs, and the opportunity to be Lane Kiffin, be the first Lane Kiffin, not just another guy, not just another Saban or Ed or Les or Spurrier or Meyer, where you can be the guy, not just another guy at another place who has already had success. On Wednesday's Power 2, which I wasn't on, I sent in a text to Cole and Tom that my prediction was LSU still. Cole flipped. Cole said he thinks he's picking Ole Miss. That may have flipped again by now. He credited that to Lowe's prediction, who we just talked about. Tom said LSU, gun to head, but that he had no idea. I think I'm going to flip my pick. At the end of the day, where's the prediction? Where's he going? My gut right now tells me he stays at Ole Miss. I think it's between Ole Miss and LSU. Yeah, I think there are reasons you think Florida could be in this. But man, as much as the insiders there have been consistent and constant on their thoughts, I don't think it goes their way. Florida fans, I'm sorry. I predicted you earlier. I thought it was you guys. I got hoodwinked too. I just don't think it happens. I'm sure you'll share this. I'm sure you'll be all over it if they go this way. But I just don't think them interviewing other candidates spells very good news for you. I don't think them moving on to other people spells good news for you. And that's what I said Saturday morning at 1:30, sitting in a hotel room, being dead tired, having bad audio, not being in our studio. That's what I'm sticking with. I don't think it's UF. I think it's LSU or Ole Miss, and I'm leaning that he stays. I'm leaning that this was him doing his due diligence, and I'm going with Ole Miss. I'm flipping the pick. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Where do you guys predict he's going? Enjoy rivalry weekend. We will be back on here, and we will talk to you guys once Lane announces. On our way out, make sure that you are using the Sleeper app. Our code is CFA for a 100% match up to $100. A whole lot of good games on today, a whole lot of better games on tomorrow that you guys can make some money with. Sleeper over on the app. Check their terms and conditions because terms of use do apply. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning into College Football Addiction. The Lane drama is coming to an end, and I can't wait to find out who was right.